Hi, welcome to the last days of the Dutch summer. Today I'm coming from you from a lovely piece of the forest where there are mostly birch trees. These are all birch trees. I've always loved birch trees, my favorite tree. I've learned in the past couple of years that the rune that's associated with the birch tree, I believe it's called perth. I'll draw it in the sky here. It's one line here. And then like this, it's the rune for initiation. So I figured this was a good place in a forest full of the energy of initiation to talk about the top 6 pagan books that will blow your mind. Because a good book, is also a bit like an initiation. So first off, why is it 6 books and why is it not 5 books? Well, I couldn't make it 5 books, so I made it 6. Secondly, what makes a good book? Well, in my opinion, a good book kicks down the doors of perception in your mind. Let me explain what that means. If you have a really good book, it's kind of like when you read certain stuff, there's part of you that recognizes what you read. But if you recognize what you read, you can't recognize it unless you already know it. So a good book, it's like it's a reacquaintance with what you already know. But it's like this, there was this wall between you and that thing that the book talks about. And by reading that book, that wall dissolves and it becomes more of a conscious part of you. So reading good books and reading good pagan books, well, I think that basically expands who you are. Full disclaimer, it's 6 books, but it's only 5 pagan books. There's one book on this list that is not a pagan book, but it is a book that will blow your mind, let me tell you. Okay, enough with the introduction, let's get into it. Number 6 on the list. What I have here, I hope you can read it. The Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge by Jeremy Narby. Now, this is a book by an anthropologist, and so it's a very rooted in rationale kind of book. It's an anthropologist who travels to South America and who meets the shamans there, and they do amazing things, and he has no rational explanation for it. So he starts to open up his mind and starts to investigate. And this mostly is a book about the secrets of ayahuasca, which they use down there. And what is lovely about it is the writer never gives up his rational mind. But at the same time, he's developing basically his other side of the brain. You have 2 sides of your brain. One is for rational thought and the other is for creativity, inspiration, that sort of thing. It's almost like when you read this book, and it's a very good, enjoyable read, it's like he's actually connecting his 2 brain halves while you're reading it. And he's helping you connect your brain halves while you're reading it. And one of the things that he found out by doing ayahuasca himself and then integrating that fully is that when shamans go with ayahuasca, they go to this place and they meet 2 big serpents. And those 2 serpents, put it over here, those 2 serpents, they tell the shaman what to do. They give him an answer. But they're 2 serpents and they're usually coiled up. He came to the conclusion that what they're probably talking to is the DNA helix. That these shamans actually don't go to another place. They go to another place, but they don't. They actually go inside themselves. And they find that DNA helix. And they talk to it. Now, that was one of the mind-blowing facts that you can find in that book. But it's a beautiful book because, you know, for me the most beautiful time is when the sun sets. When the sun sets and there's a transition between one world and the other, between one state and another state. And that's what this book is. It's a transition between one thing and another thing, but it never truly transitions. It always stays at exactly the center, at this place where the magic happens. So Jeremy Narby, DNA and Oranges of Knowledge. You have to check that out. Number 5 on the list. This is the non-pagan book on the list. Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. Not a pagan book, will blow your mind. It's a book about the IMF. Now, you hear a lot about the IMF on the news. Usually you hear things like, well, the IMF, you know, the International Monetary Fund, they're helping this country which is in dire financial straits. They're giving out loans to countries who need them. But when you read this book, you figure out that it's not so much the International Monetary Fund, it's more like the international mafia family. John Perkins used to work for the IMF. And he used to go into countries and tell them, yo, you really need loans, man. Your economy is going to blow up big time. You're going to have double-digit growth. Your economy is going to grow and you can't keep up. You need to start building hospitals, roads, lots of stuff. You need to be ready for this expansion. Look, we got all these economists from Harvard and they know what they're talking about, and they show them the models. And so sooner or later, these world leaders, they took the bait. They said, listen, I want to be known as the president who built all these roads and who made all these hospitals. Okay. But here's the trick. In those loans are conditions that make it almost impossible for you to pay back the loans. And when it's time that you have to say, like, after a while, like, oh, I can't pay back the loans because those economic predictions that they made never come true. And then you can't pay them back. And then the IMF comes knocking on your door again and they say, well, you can't pay your loans back, so now we need something else as collateral. You know, you have a railroad system and that's run by the government, and you have like water is a human right in your country. You have to sell those water companies to our friends for like really cheap because like you're financially really worse off. That's how the IMF operates. Now, John Perkins used to work there and he wrote this book, and it reads like a thriller. You can just, like in a good weekend, you can go through it because it's incredibly exciting. And you'll never, ever look at the World Bank, the IMF, you never look at them again in the same way. It's a really big eye-opener. Sometimes I think the IMF kind of works the same as the WHO, but I need to figure that out because like the WHO also helps countries, but they're always worse off when the WHO leaves, just like the IMF. You can look this up, by the way. You can just look up IMF and the countries they've helped. Always worse off by the time the IMF leaves. I never understood that, by the way. Like, you know, there was in the news 10 years ago that Greece had too many debt. They have like too many loans. So the IMF says we're going to help them. What do? Give them more loans. How do you fix a problem? Well, good. Read the book. It's entertaining as hell, and it gives you an insight in the world of man and the world of finance. Good. Okay. What are we down to? 6, 5, 4. It's going to be a long video. 4 on the list. Black Elk. This is Black Elk, Sacred Ways of the Lakota. You have 2 books by Black Elk. One is Black Elk Speaks, the other is this one. I had to pick one Lakota book. Now you can pick Lame Deer, which I adore. You can pick Crow Dog, which is really great. I picked Black Elk because Black Elk, this was written down from transcripts, meaning he talked on a tape recorder, and there was some guy who listened to that and who cut it all up and helped it make more sense, because Black Elk used to speak, he just kind of went all over the place. So if he talked about, let's say, the Inipi ceremony or the Hamblesha ceremony, he speak a bit and then he speak about something else. So he cut it all up, so he made it more understandable for people who came from it from a more rational mind. But besides the fact that you get this unique insight in a culture, in basically pre-America America, in a shamanic culture that honored the land and the land spirits and worked with these sacred energies and really had a whole culture around that, it really gives a unique perspective. And because they literally write it down the way he speaks, when I read it, I felt like Black Elk was in the room with me. Because I've met some people who are Lakota, who came from Pine Ridge. I think I met 2, so not a lot. But they always talk in a certain way. And it's like, you know, in Lakota way, we talk like this. They have a certain tone of voice, and even in that tone of voice, and even in the way they arrange their sentences, you feel the connection that they have with their culture and with their way of life, still to this day. So if you really want to learn about Native Americans and their culture, and not only learn, but feel, get that book about Black Elk. Okay. Black Elk. What have we got? We got 3 more. I got 3 more books left, and they're all 3. Nah, we got a controversial one coming. It's fat book. Can't even lift it with one hand. Hold on to your underwear. De sleutel tot zelfbevrijding van Christian Beerland, which translates literally to the key to self-liberation. Now, controversial book, I'll tell you why. It's a book, it's an encyclopedia for diseases. But it tells you your psychosomatic state, your state of your mind, your body and your soul that led to you being sick. First of all, why is this a pagan book? Well, I think this references a pagan principle, that the outside world and even our own bodies are not just some random stuff. They're a reflection and they're an echo of who we are. So when our body is sick, that means we are sick. We are out of balance, and our body only imitates and reflects our own out of balanceness. Now, this is a controversial subject. I've believed it since I was like 6. So this is like something that's really close to my heart. And I don't talk about it. I talked about it when I was younger. I was more stupid. Because when I talk about it, I always got the same reaction. Always got people coming up to me, yeah, well, my grandmother, you know, my grandmother was just perfect. She was this perfect human being and she died of cancer. Are you gonna tell me that my perfect grandmother made herself sick? How dare you? And I was like, yeah, how dare I suggest that your grandmother was a flawed human being just like the rest of us? Huh? Silly me. But that's why it's a controversial subject. Now for me, I've always looked inside. I've maybe even looked too much inside, but that's just me. That's how it's got to be for me. Every time I've gotten sick, even if I like had a pain in my shoulder, gotten a headache, or gotten appendicitis, got a infection in my colon, I've always looked for where is the disbalance. I've done this with myself, but my day job is a nurse. And I've been a nurse for 14 years now. Seen a lot of sick people. And it didn't change my beliefs that I've had since I was 6. Didn't change them at all. Like I said, there are an insane amount of diseases and dysfunctions that are in this book. 1100. It's alphabetized, so it handles everything from breaking your leg, getting a headache, to muscular dystrophy. And when you read it and you take your time with it, it basically says what you did or how you feel, that the normal progression is the physical ailment that you have. It tells you the cause, but it also tells you what you can switch to make yourself better. Now, like I said, controversial subjects, because then you have to take responsibility for your own thoughts and your own lives, and for a lot of people that's not very attractive. So yeah, if you're somewhat interested in learning that maybe you have some ownership in what happens inside your body, Key to Self-Liberation by Christian Beerland couldn't recommend it more than this book. Yeah, keep coming back to this. It's helping me a lot. It literally is the key to your self-liberation. Two more books left. Now, got distracted, got a crow in the background. What we have here, another fat book. What we have here is the Bhagavad Gita. Yes. I'm already 18 minutes in this video and I have to talk about the Gita. How can you talk about the Gita in a couple of minutes? You can't. First of all, when I looked for this book, and if you want to buy this book, I recommend you don't get one that's translated by a white person. It's not because I'm racist against white people. It's just that, in my experience, the other versions of the book that I've read, the white people that translated it understand it, but they understand it from the mind. And when you read it, I get this mind energy, this like really square, organized. And that's not what I want when I read the Bhagavad Gita. I want somebody to translate it who's Indian. I want somebody to translate it who's been told this story since little. I want somebody whose bloodline has been told this story for over 5,000 years. Because that's how old this book is. Because that person breathes, sweats, and is the essence of the Gita when he talks about it. And This version is Mansukh Patel. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a great guy, has some great yoga courses. I don't do yoga, by the way. I did it once. I'm going to do it again. Mansukh Patel, Bhagavad Gita. So, what makes the Gita so great? Like I said, more than 5,000 years old. When you have Norse mythology and Irish mythology and Germanic old tales, you could argue, that they're no good. Why? Because they were written down by Christian monks. They basically were written down by the invading army that destroyed the culture. So how can you trust that? Well, I think you can trust that, but that's probably subject for another video. But the Bhagavad Gita, in India, there never was this foreign power. There never was Christianity or Islam, even though there's a lot of Islam nowadays in India and they have troubles with that, but it never happened. So this Bhagavad Gita, you know it's not altered and it's exactly the way it should be. What's in the Bhagavad Gita? Oh yeah, it's a famous battle between good and evil. It's about Arjuna getting his instructions from Krishna. But it's not about that. It's about that, but it's not about that. Because it's so ancient, you know there's wisdom in there that the ancestors put in there so the new generations can live in a good way. I believe that mythology is more important than history. Because history is usually just written by the victor, so it's basically just a lie that's been agreed upon by everybody. But mythology really is our ancestors giving us the information to survive and to prosper in life. Because we think stuff changes, but it really doesn't. It doesn't change that much. It's the same archetypes that are running the show now that were running the show 5,000 years ago. So if you have difficulty in your life, you can also always come to the Bhagavad Gita. You can always read it, and you can always get something valuable in it. Now, and it's not only that it's so full of this sacred information and all these insights. The way it's written, it's like somebody has a feather and it's caressing my heart chakra while I read it. That's how it feels. It's so beautiful. It really touched my heart. So yeah, in fact, this book is the only book that I only touch when I have a good day. I only touch it when I haven't eaten meat that day. Otherwise, I won't touch it. Now, this version by Mansukh Patel is good for a number of reasons. One of them, it's actually two books. One is the Bhagavad Gita, and two is a book that helps you interpret the Bhagavad Gita. So that's important. It helps you get on the road with the Gita, and also it has some breathing exercises. Now you go like, well, big whoop, get a fucking breathing exercise. I know how to breathe, but it literally has a breathing exercise, and it probably will cure, I think, 60% of everything that ails you. I'm not joking. If you get the right amount of life energy in your body, lots of miracles can happen. So Bhagavad Gita, timeless wisdom that transcends all time and space, written in a way that caresses your heart with a feather while you read it. It's a book that makes your life better by its mere existence, and we should all be grateful and all be thankful that the Christians or the Muslims didn't conquer India, because we still have beautiful pearls like this. Okay. We're going to the #1 book. A long video this. Dun, dun, dun. You're probably thinking, when is he going to get to the Norse mythology books? Well, you're in luck. The last one is, the best one is. Best one is the Havamal. Yes, you all know it, I think, and I think you already love it. Now I heard some things about the Jackson Crawford version not being good. I don't know. I don't got the Jackson Crawford version. I should probably order that. I got this for a long time. Now, you hear me talk about Native Americans and how I love that and how I connect to that. You hear me talk about Hinduism and how I connect to that. And, you know? So, this is different for me. Some of you might know that I tried to live like a Hindu for 3 years. I didn't try. I lived like a Hindu for 3 years because I thought, like, there's nothing here that is as beautiful as that over there. So I just leave everything and just run. Didn't work out that well. And, you know, I'm really into Native American stuff. In fact, I think it's next weekend where I'm going on Big Sweat Lodge weekend with John Fire Limdeer. But, you know, I'm not a Native American. I would like to be, and I would know a couple of years ago I really wanted to be a Native American, but I'm not. I'm a Dutch guy. I'm a broodje kaas. The Havamal was the first time where I read a book. Just this shit. Where I read a book. Where I connected with it deeply. And it felt like it was already in my bones. Now, I love Hinduism. It's not in my bones. I love Native American stuff. I really do, but I don't feel it's in my bones. I have a feeling that the Havamal was already there, inside of me. I can't explain that. So that's what it's for me personally. If you don't know what the Havamal is, by the way, it's just a lot of stanzas, a lot of text, and basically just short 1 or 2 sentences. Just advice for good life. Sayings of the High One. So a lot of people believe it's literally Odin that's talking to you. That it's sayings from the one-eyed God. I do believe that also. All the sayings are very profound. All the sayings connect to deeper wisdom. All the sayings are like Gungir, Odin's spear. The one I have on my neck today. They hit right on the mark. The funny stuff is, you get that book? Funny stuff is, a lot of what's in here, some of it you know. And when I read the Havamal, I'm reminded of how powerful Odin is, how strong his wisdom is. Because, you know, you ever heard that saying, well, if it looks like a duck and it quacks, it's probably a duck? Yeah. First time I heard that was on an episode of Dr. Phil. I like that saying. I think most people, at least in America, know that saying. It's from the Havamal. It's not word for word, but there is a saying in here which says, if it looks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, you are probably dealing with a duck. It's not word for word, but when you read it, you know it's the same quote. Now, that's what I mean when I talk about the power of Odin. The power of his wisdom. The way he hits the mark. Do you realize that once upon a time, his forests, Holland, Germany, Denmark, England, Ireland, were all sacrificing to Wodan, to Odin, all the old gods, and somehow the people who worshipped him, they were converted, they were killed. All his statues were burned, everything was destroyed. Everything that reminds us of Odin was destroyed. Some Christian monks wrote down some stuff. That's why we still have some stuff on Nordic mythology. But his wisdom is so good and so great that a lot of his sayings survived. You know these sayings, you know them. Not all of them, you know some of them. Some of them are still inside of you. Doesn't matter if you're an atheist, a pagan, or a Christian. Somehow they killed everything related to Odin, but he still lives. He lives in each and every one of you inside of your heart. Now that is an accomplishment. And for that accomplishment, I will put the Havamal on the #1 of my list. That's the list. Thank you for watching all the way through this video. If you would like more book reviews, let me know. If you would like one of these books reviewed in depth, because I could talk about the Bhagavad Gita all day, every day. For instance, I could talk about the Key to Self-Liberation all day, every day. I have a history with that book. Key to Self-Liberation is like not the first book I read on psychosomatic stuff, by the way. I read many, and that encyclopedia of illnesses is the best there is. So, if you'd like that, let me know. That's basically it. From the forests of Holland, on the last days of summer, I bid you farewell. May the gods take notice. Yeah, the #1 book that you absolutely have to have as a Norse pagan. I mean, it's just like touched me so and helped me tremendously. It's a practical guide to racism by C.H. Dalton. You know, when you're a Nordic pagan, you just have to get your racism. You just have to get it just right, you know, and this really helps. It helps redirect your hate. It tells you who to hate and how to hate. It's very... No, of course not. Don't be racist, you wankers. Peace. Yeah, well, of course, the book that's really helped me throughout the years gain perspective and tolerance is How to Live with a Huge Penis. It's the only self-help book in this list, and it just has a lot of poetry and a lot of insight to be more tolerant, and how to deal with having such a massive dong.